Yes, it is that time again for, of course, Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am Dean Phillips, and I am your host. And today, it's a very interesting day. I thought I read this wrong. I have Will Healy here again, but I can't believe this. This must be written incorrectly. It says Universal Robots, and he is now the global segment manager for welding. Will, is this correct?
It is, yeah.
That's excellent. Well, I'm glad to see that. Congratulations. It's great to have you back on the show, of course.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be back. It's really, I missed it, and I love to listen to it.
Great to have you, of course. And so, as I mentioned, you are the global segment manager for welding for Universal Robots, and you're also a founding board member for the Cincinnati Manufacturing for AMIP, correct?
Yeah, correct. You know, the Advanced Manufacturing Industry Partnerships are like local association. It's all the manufacturers working together with the schools and the partners in the area, and it's just a great organization. That
is great to hear. It's great to encourage manufacturing on a local level and at something outside of the college. If you can start earlier, the better off I think we will be in our future. So thank you for doing that.
Awesome.
So right away, what's your big takeaway for 5 years from now? What do you see changing on the horizon?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, for me, when I look out, you know, 5 years sounds like it's far away, but it's really not that far away. Right. So, to me, what I really see is this workforce trend is not a short-lived problem for us. So, you know, as we're looking out 5 years, I see a shift towards the worker being a really important part of our business, having real value in our frontline workers. And what our frontline workers expect changing, because the mix of our frontline workers, most of our boomers will have retired in 5 years, and we're going to have a lot of Gen Z entering our workplace, and they're going to change the dynamic and the expectation of how we succeed, and they're going to change the expectation of how we engage our workers. And I think it's really important to know that those impacts from the Gen Z are really going to change the way we work. And we're going to change it from this production and process-centric thinking, financial return on investments, to more of a human-centric thinking, like how can we create value for the worker? How can we have the worker create more value? And how can we have a good lifestyle or a life for the worker? Because they're going to be the most important asset in our building.
Right. And I think the one thing that people, when they're talking about the future and talking about developing workforce, how do we develop people? I think one of the challenge there is that most of the things that I hear are long-term solutions. So they're a minimum of 2 to as much as 10 years away from solving that workforce problem. But that problem is here today. And as people continue to retire, it's going to be over the next few years a problem. So other than specifically workers being a solution, what other solutions do we have in the short term?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a fair question. You know, I see a lot of really exciting technologies right now. I like to talk about people-centric technology investments, or some people will call it collaborative automation, where the technology and the automation technologies are actually working with people in the same space, in the same work envelope, in the same, you know, work cell. And so we have automation and people working together. And for those who are in maybe high-end automotive, big, large companies, they've actually had worker automation collaboration more over the last couple of years. But when I'm looking forward, it's for the small and the medium size, where traditional automation really was not approachable, maybe still not as approachable, but collaborative automation technologies are becoming more approachable to them. And so I'm really excited for this kind of category of automation And the kinds of technologies that are in that category are really fun to me and really interesting.
Yeah. So give us a little update on what you've been up to over the last few years since you've been on the show. What you've been doing? Obviously, job change in that and career completely. I would say a shift. I wouldn't say completely changed, but because certainly sensors come into play everywhere. So what else have you been up to?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. It's all kind of like linked together, but the last couple of years, what I've really been doing is I was spending a lot of time talking about condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. You might have heard these two terms. And before people tune out, I know all those buzzwords of, smart manufacturing and smart factory and Industry 4.0. Those are all, I'm not a big fan of buzzwords, but the thing about condition monitoring that I love is this is about getting the uptime on our equipment better, getting our productivity better, stop firefighting all the time, and let's know things are broken before they actually break, right? I heard a really interesting presentation from an insurance group where they talked about at FabTech just a couple of weeks ago, or last week. Was that last week? At FabTech, I heard an insurance group talk about how one of the most dangerous times in a factory is during an unplanned downtime event. Because everyone's rushing, everyone's trying to get the equipment running. There's a lot of people watching you, and so you feel a lot of pressure. And we all know when we're rushing and we feel pressure that we're more likely to make a mistake. And so those mistakes can be very dangerous inside an automation environment, whether they forget to, put a lockout tagout on, or they forget to de-energize something, or they go to do something that causes a safety problem. More mistakes happen is what the insurance company was presenting during those unplanned downtime events. So how can we not have unplanned downtime events? And condition monitoring is one of those things where you put a sensor on it, or you inspect it regularly and you look, is it hotter than it was last month? Is it hotter than it was last shift? Is it vibrating more than it was? Is it, these kinds of conditions? There's a really interesting curve called the PF curve, from when it could potential to fail to actual failure. There's all these different states that you can study and monitor to actually know that something is breaking before it actually breaks. And so I've been talking a lot about that. And what I like about condition monitoring, this is actually one of those people-centric technologies that I was talking about. At first you're thinking, no, that's motor monitoring. But because the motor monitoring is eliminating the unplanned downtime, it's reducing risk in your factory for injuries for your workers. And so by implementing condition monitoring, we're actually reducing risk for those workers.
Right.
And I've seen some other ways people are doing that too, with like drones. There's some really cool, if you Google Ford and drones, they're using it to do inspection. They're using drones to fly up and do inspections like in the crowns of presses.
Yep.
So that you don't have to climb up there. That's dangerous to climb up there and to climb around up there. You have to have all the climbing gear and, probably in some companies, a bunch of signatures and, 5 people standing around watching. When you can fly a drone up, you can compare the footage from the drone from the last time you flew it up there and say, oh, there's more oil over there. Let's get some tools together and check that out. So they're making work safer by implementing technology for condition monitoring. And I just think that's really a neat, maybe not obvious, but really neat investment in your workers to keep their work safer, so they can go home at the end of the day and watch, their son or daughter play a sport, play soccer.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that reducing risk is one area that technology really could play such a significant role. The things that you can do to that are significant hazards, like going into confined spaces, or as you mentioned,
great example.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I mean, everyone's seen Spot the Robot Dancing Dog, right? You've seen that from Boston Dynamics, the yellow. It's a whole category called quadruped. There's a bunch of different brands that make them. But, having that go into a confined space, or that going out into an outbuilding or somewhere remote, and no one has to walk out there or climb in that space or get a bunch of certifications. You can send the robot dog there, the quadruped robot. And that's a really interesting technology.
Yeah. Why would you risk your human collateral to have somebody go up or into a confined space? Because the reason that there are so many things that we do for confined space investigations is that it is very high risk things, just like going up in a man lift. If you have to go up on top of a machine, there's a lot of specific training you have to go through, whereas a drone can go up there, and the worst thing that happens is it falls to the ground and breaks. Now, I'm not advocating everyone should, go home and get their DJ Mini and bring it into work tomorrow. That's definitely not what I'm advocating. No.
You have to have some controlled policies and some decisions. It's a purposeful implementation of the technology in your workspace. But I'm just citing some really interesting things that people are doing, applying technology into their workspace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, and talking about conditional and how we can incorporate that into safety, I think once you start to tie in artificial intelligence into how you're going to do that conditional monitoring, it opens up a lot of opportunities there for reducing risk. I'll give you a perfect example. Is we were trending a situation where we couldn't figure out how somebody had been injured around a machine, and what we did was track what was the sequence of events. And for all the rest of the workers, except for the one person, they went in through the front gate. They unlocked the gate, that shut the machine off and everything else. This person came in through the side where the reel was, and they had crawled underneath and kind of bypassed that. Now, I'm not saying it was that person's fault, but it was that we didn't, he wasn't aware that he wasn't supposed to go in that way. Okay. And there you go. And sometimes understanding the psychology of people can change things. Anybody who's ever been in a manufacturing plant, and especially in a stamping facility, I see workers do things that are clearly unsafe for them. They're doing something that's unsafe, but they're doing it in the name of trying to improve production, because they believe, well, I'm not stopping the machine while I'm cleaning up scrap. I'm not stopping the machine while I go in here and get out whether it's the slugs from a stamping or whatever. But they believe that, and you can start to track some of these things and help people. It's an educational thing. It's like, look, we need to educate people better. And through these tools, it can illustrate where the problems are that we need better education.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Roberta Nelson Shea from Universal Robots was on way back in season 2, 205 episode. And
okay, I haven't listened to that one. I guess I should have before I got on the call. That's
okay. That's all right. But she was talking about product compliance, and we talk about sometimes about one area of safety, but one of the things I think when we talk about robots is how do we work with them, whether it's the safety things that we have to do when we're working around robots, or whether it is in a cobot environment where people are working directly with or near a smaller version of a robot. What do you see as some of the challenges that we have, especially on the welding side now?
Yeah, I think, you started this whole thing off talking about what do I see 5 years from now. And I think, we can't have workers doing the simple, basic machine tending, the repetitive, the dull things, right? Like, we need to have robots do what robots do well, and we need to have people do what people do well. And robots do the repetitive things really well, and the people do the problem solving, like really thinking things really well. And so, when I look at applications like welding, you still need the knowledge of the welding expert. You still need that welder who understands, what is the torch angle, and knows how much gas to run for the weld they're trying to do. And so we still need that knowledge. We need that expertise. But we also do need that expert making the same part 100 times, right? It's really hard for a human to be perfectly repeatable. And anyone who tells you they can make exactly the perfect, exact same part 100 times in a row, they're lying to themselves, probably. Maybe there's 1 in a million that can do that. But most people, they have variation in their work over time. And so instead of that boring job for that welder doing the same weld over and over again, we can have the robot do that weld while they do something that takes more knowledge or the more intricate weld or harder weld that maybe the robot can't do. How do we shift our mindset from just having people doing things to having people use their brains and the knowledge and their problem solving ability and their ability to be creative, and have the robots do the things that robots do well, like repetitive work.
Right.
And so I really like this idea of human working with a robot, and the idea of robot as a tool. I don't know if you ever heard this, but robot as a tool is one that I really like, because it's not augmenting the worker. Just like, when you were screwdriving, you used to just have a screwdriver in your hand and you would do it, and your wrist would hurt after. Anyone who's done the home improvement project with more than 5 screws knows what I'm talking about, right? Your wrist hurts after you screwed 5 screws in, maybe 10, whatever. But the screwdriver drill, that was a tool that we added that made you more efficient and more productive, and you don't hurt as much physically using the screwdriver drill. So the robot is really being brought in, especially the collaborative robot, the cobot, is brought in. Robot is a tool, cobot is a tool to allow us to augment the worker and to make them more productive, but we're still using all that knowledge and all that intelligence and using their brain and using the robot for the repetitive, dull, dangerous, dirty parts that, are kind of the mostly physical parts of the job. And I really like this idea because, we talked about, workers are a common theme. How do we retain people? Well, if we have a job that's dull and boring and dirty and dangerous and hot and we get burned by sparks and that job's not very fun. If you can find something else making the same amount of money, you're going to go do it. But if we can allow people to do creative and problem-solving things, they'll feel more fulfilled, and they work with the robot. And so the robot also brings a higher employee satisfaction. And I find that really interesting and satisfying. And that's true for really all the different types of products inside of collaborative automation.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because to me, those are the areas that we really can expand robots. Safety. So any area that it's unsafe for a human to do, whether it's bomb disposal robots, or it's going into hazardous areas or hazardous heights or things like that. Anytime we can do things that remove the risk, that's a huge aspect where we should use robots. The second one, of course, is like you said, repetitive. If it's repetitive and we can do it easily with a robot so that it's doing the same thing. Instead of it's making the same motion, it's going to do it as well, if not better. Why? Because it's always going to feed the same amount of wire. It's always going to run at the same temperature. It's always going to run in the same motion. Now, if we programmed it wrong, shame on us.
Yeah, that's a different case. Yeah, for sure.
But that's
and I think a lot of people in this space are maybe they think of traditional robotics, and it's a high amount of complexity and can be a little overwhelming or even overly expensive for what they're trying to do. Doesn't fit because we have high mix, low volume, right? We're a job shop or a contract manufacturer. We don't make automotive parts. We don't make structural parts. We're a job shop. And I think that's really where collaborative automation is interesting, because it's very flexible and it's purposefully designed, whether it's collaborative robots or it's operator guidance technologies like projection-based AR or augmented reality or like virtual lights or operator guidance with lighting. there are virtual work instructions. There are a lot of really cool like operator guidance automations and collaborative robot automations that are very flexible and reprogrammable and allow you to do high mix, low volume automation that was not possible before with traditional automation.
Right. And that opens the door to a lot of people. Do you think that what's the barrier right now? Do you think it is more money? I can't make that investment in a robot or into some level of automation, or do you think it's that they don't know it's even available or what it can do?
I'm thinking a lot of people have gotten burned by automation over the years, right? If you've been in manufacturing for 20 years, there have been a lot of technologies that made promises that couldn't deliver.
I like that term.
I mean, right? And so I think a lot of us have probably bought a piece of automation that's currently collecting dust on a rack somewhere or in a corner somewhere or out in a back lot rusting in the rain. A lot of us have had an experience over the years where we made a technology investment and it didn't work. And so that makes us hesitate. And I respect that and I understand that. But I think at this point, you have no choice but to automate because this is something you have to be working towards because of the workforce situations that we're dealing with, because of the demands from customers that we're dealing with, because of the flexibility expectations that are really being placed on manufacturing. The only way you're going to be able to serve that market 5 years from now, we're always trying to talk to the future, right? But like the only way you're going to serve that market is to start investing in automation now, and collaborative automation is really approachable and really allows you to scale up, to do incrementally, right? You don't have to like blow out a giant part of your floor and put a big gator on it unless that's what the safety application tells you to do. Right. You have opportunities to incrementally implement automation, and because it's flexible and can be repurposed regardless of what the collaborative technology is, if the sensor isn't working in a condition monitoring application, let's unbolt it from there and let's try it somewhere else. And it's pretty easy to get that vibration sensor going on something else. If the collaborative robot's not working exactly the way we intended for welding, let's apply it to machine tending. If the operator guidance system's not working exactly the way we want it, we can apply it to a different assembly or different product. So the cool thing about collaborative automation, this whole space, is the ability to really be able to be flexible and find wins, even if the first implementation doesn't work, it doesn't have to get dusty in the corner. And so I feel like the risk is lower. And I do want to address the money question, because the longer you wait right now, interest rates are not going down. I mean, I'm not a banker,
right.
and I don't do banking forecasting, but as a generalization, if you look at the way that the economy is going, interest rates aren't going down, Dean. So the longer you wait to make investments, the more expensive that money will be. So the lowest interest rate you will get probably in the next, maybe not in the next 5 years, but in the foreseeable future, is the interest rate you have right now today. And you may be balking at that because they were a lot lower 2 years ago, but you didn't buy automation 2 years ago. You're looking, you have to buy it now. And so this is the lowest interest rate you're going to get in the foreseeable future. So move now because the money will only get more expensive.
Right. And I agree with that. It's a challenge that everyone's faced with. The one aspect that I think people, they get bogged down by seeing everything that needs to be done. And I always tell people this, small incremental improvements is how you're going to justify the change. But even more importantly, it's going to illustrate the improvement. So taking one robot or cobot and putting it into an application, now by illustrating what changes that's made, how that's maybe saved somebody from a safety standpoint, it's gotten them out of it's lowered your risk pool because of that. Maybe it has... it's able to do a task, quality, all of those things. Then you could then take that and illustrate and say, we could do this plant wide if we're willing to make that investment across the board. But you got to start with one. Start with one.
Yeah. And I would say don't find the biggest problem in your plant. Some people who give you advice will say, find the biggest problem and solve that. And that is not the advice we'll give.
Yeah.
Like, let's find something that hurts, but isn't so painful that it's like wildly visible to everybody if it fails.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, failure is not a problem. We learn a lot from failure. And so we should be open and okay to that. And we become less okay to failure if it's the most visible, most painful thing in the plant. So a lot of people want to start there because it creates the quote unquote most return on investment, but it's probably not where you're going to learn. There's probably a reason it's the biggest problem in the plant. It's probably multi-factor. There's probably, bad documented processes. There's probably all kinds of things that are making that the biggest problem. So don't start there. Start with something that's small but has some pain, and learn from that and work towards that biggest problem in the plant. Don't start with the biggest problem in the plant because it's just so visible, and it won't help you build momentum and help you build success.
And in my experience, a lot of times the implementation on that line or in that application is one that is it's wrought with issues in that you're going to be under the gun to get that done, and you'll probably cut corners to make this thing work. And then as soon as it isn't done in as quick as everybody would like to see it, they're going to say, pull that out so we can get back to running and doing it the way we've always done it. So right. That you're absolutely right. There's no question in my mind in what I've seen that the knee-jerk reaction to go back to the way it was is very high in that application. So I agree with you. Find an application that has some pain points, but is one that isn't so critical that it's going to be under a lot of pressure to succeed immediately.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What other technologies have you seen that you're excited about that are coming down the pike?
Yeah, man. I mean, I talked about condition monitoring, right, with like sensors and drones and quadrupeds. I talked about that. I talked about cobots, which I'm just so excited about, this idea of robot as a tool and augmenting the worker. I mentioned operator guidance, automation, so things like projection. I don't know if you've ever seen these like light guide.
Oh, yeah.
They actually project a work instruction on a table, or they light up different bins or light up different steps or show the steps on a material. It's really cool. There's similar augmented reality glass versions that give instructions, and there's virtual work instructions like on a screen that show videos of how to do steps. That whole idea of operator guidance, being able to onboard someone who's never worked in your plant before, and how many of us are working with temps right now, to have automation stepping the temp through and double checking and following the temp as they do their job and onboarding those people faster. That's the power of that operator guidance automation that I think is really interesting. And then I have two more. Autonomous mobile robots. I don't know if you've seen these. It's like a mobile fork truck. It'll carry a pallet around or these kinds of things. They're robotic fork trucks. I really find these interesting and fascinating. We talked about reducing risk. Another big risk in our plants is all the fork trucks driving around, right?
Oh, yes.
There's the vehicles where people are. They're carrying heavy loads, moving quickly around blind corners. There's a lot of risk around fork trucks. And so the movement of material, the movement of scrap, the movement of material between operations, or the movement from your incoming material moving to the first machine, all of these things, there's a huge category now of mobile robots, AMRs, you hear, your AGVs and AIVs, and there's lots of acronyms. But this idea of autonomous robots that drive around moving material, this kind of material handling robot space, is really interesting to me because it's very collaborative, right? Like it's working with people to bring material where they need it and where we need it through the plant. And they have safety features like detecting people's presence and those kinds of things. And so I find autonomous mobile robots also a really interesting type of collaborative automation that I think you can even implement one. I've seen a number of case studies and stories where people are implementing one for a major route that goes back and forth like all day, right? Like, or a little circle of material that moves around the plant, and just having one. You don't need to replace every fork truck in the plant. the flexibility of a fork truck is very flexible. But the idea of having an autonomous mobile robot in your plant helping move material that's predictable or even on-demand material, these are really cool things that are being done with AMR that I haven't really seen before and I think are really cool. And the last one, and certainly not least, is wearables and especially exoskeletons. Have you seen any of these technologies?
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. And I have a friend of mine that works in that space, and it's really incredible between the wearable technologies and then the exoskeletons to be able to lift and make work easier for our people.
The lifting assist blows me away. Like really, it is so powerful, and it helps with ergonomics. It helps it reduces the workman comp claims right in a facility because we're making sure people are lifting the proper way. We're assisting the lifts with the people. And there's some really cool tech out there that's getting rid of repetitive motion disease, repetitive motion disease from being able to have lift assist and ergonomic-based tools like exoskeletons. And I thought the exoskeleton, I mean, when I hear that, it's like I rolled my eyes. And then I went to a little trade show where all they had was wearables. So that you could try them on, and I was just blown away by the power of the exoskeleton. Like the ability to have your arms above your head for the whole day. Like people are doing that kind of work, and the exoskeleton makes it possible for them to do that work. And then I've seen like smart gloves where they have like servos built into the fingers to make your grip stronger, so you can hold a tool longer, or you can pick things up easier without hurting your hands. Just really interesting. Automation and technology collaborative with the worker, reducing the risks of injury and making the work better and having a better engaged employee who's happier with their job. Because ultimately what it boils down to is we want employees, when they're sitting at a baseball game on the weekend and their next door neighbors complaining about how annoying and how much they hate their job, and they say, "Hey, Gene, where do you work? Is that a fun place to work? Should I come work there?" You want your employees saying yes, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So we want our employees saying yes. And so that's really when we make investments like that, it's not just about the profitability and the productivity and the flexibility and the higher quality. Those things do come from these technologies. But right now with the workforce issues the way they are, and they're not going to go away anytime soon, the ability to create employee satisfaction while also creating those things makes collaborative automation like really interesting to me.
Right. I agree. Well, we're just about out of time here, sir. How can people get in touch with you for your your Will Automate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the best way. You can find me on pretty much all the socials, wherever it is. Will Automate. LinkedIn's my number one platform. Twitter, if it's still around when this podcast drops. And really a lot of the socials, I'm out there on YouTube as well as Will Automate. So that's the best way to find me.
And that's how do you spell that?
Yeah, just Will, like the word Will, and then the word Automate, all smashed together. So right. Will Automate.
And that's 2 L's. Will Automate.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, and I appreciate everybody out there listening. Make it a great day.